Welcome to our roundtable, buy versus build versus outsource, making the right call for your target operating model. So this is a discussion on how we best achieve operational and investment excellence in a world of constant change, or as we sometimes say, in a world of technological hyper-innovation. My name is Thomas Akram, and 2026 is my 30th year in financial technology, split between software and consulting. I joined Fencore as Managing Director for EMEA in 2023. And the buy versus build versus outsource discussion is at least as old as the decades I've spent in the industry. But the narrative has changed over the years, which is why it remains relevant. Technology is changing faster than ever, especially with cloud, no low-code solution, and AI. And the traditional integrated versus best-of-breed battle has to a very large extent been replaced with interoperability and simplified integration and data exchange. Furthermore, outsourcing is no longer a binary discussion or a simple replacement of expensive resources with more affordable alternatives. We see outsourcing of niche functions, new functions, old holy cows, and the concept of centers of excellence in a global and consistently more globalized world. Finally, with change galore, an agile target operating model needs to be flexible when certain components, insourced or outsourced, come to the end of its life cycle. With all of that in mind, we have invited industry experts and thought leaders to share past reflections and future predictions, which they will share with us all today. Our webinars, this is the second one, and our roundtables, we have done lots of them in the UK, the Nordics, and in APAC, are all about identifying interesting subjects, making sure we have the right people in the room, the right people around the table, so we can openly discuss various options and potential solutions. As always, we have more questions than answers, and that might be the case even at the conclusion of today's 1-hour session. We have prepared some of those questions for our guest speakers, but we encourage all of you to submit your questions during the session, and then we will try to answer those to the best of our ability at the end of the hour. We will also be running a couple of polls, so please do engage and let us know what you think. We will also follow up with post-webinar reflections, white papers, and encourage people to stay in touch and to continue the conversation. So this is the second one of today. In total, we have more than 125 participants from asset managers and owners and service providers of all shapes and sizes. So a big thank you to all of you for that and taking the time to participate. Quickly about Fencore. We are a cloud-native, no-code data management solution for asset managers and owners of all shapes and sizes across all asset classes, public and private market, and structured and unstructured data. We try to prioritize simplicity and don't necessarily think that you need a complex solution to solve a complex problem, and those problems will just increase in complexity with the sophistication of the industry, of products, of client expectations. We do believe, though, that consistent high-quality data is the foundation for operational excellence and innovation for investment managers. On balance, we suggest prioritizing an easy-to-use, business-centric data solution that is in constant change, catering for both new, refined, and future requirements, regardless of organizational structure and preferences regarding in versus outsourcing. On that note, I will hand over to James Crosby, Fencore's CEO and founder, and our guest speakers.
Fantastic. Thank you, Thomas. All right, so let's move on to the guest speaker introductions. So I'll hand over the reins, please, to Duncan to kick things off, please.
Oh, you want to start with me? Oh, that's shocking. I wasn't prepared, but lovely to meet everybody. I'm Duncan Cooper, as you can see, slightly less hairy now on the chin. I'm not quite as old as Thomas in the industry, but about 28 years in asset management, technology, and more recently asset servicing in senior data roles at the likes of NT, BMY, and HSBC.
Fantastic. And Anya, next, please.
Hi, everyone. So I work at Alpha FMC. We have over 1,250 consultants globally, where we're split across UK, US, and then the rest of the world. We specialize in answering some of the questions that Thomas has raised at the beginning of that. So working with clients to define their data strategy, to think about what model best suits them across the buy, build, and outsource. And then we support them all the way through that journey, so including implementation and helping them to get that across the line. So really excited to talk to everyone today.
Great, thank you, Anya. And last but not least, Jason.
Thank you all. Good afternoon or good morning. Jason Wood, similar age to Duncan, about 30 years as a practitioner in asset management, 20 plus years at Schroders, in ops tech change, 4 years as head of data. More recently been COO roles across wealth and now into asset ownership sphere.
Fantastic. I'll just briefly introduce myself as well. So James Crosby, CEO and founder at Fencore, spent about 20 years in the data management space for the investment management community, much of that with Cadis, who then went on to become market EDM and a globally leading product within the buy side, followed by some time at Neoxam as well, and then started Fencore 7 years ago, almost to the day now. And yeah, really excited to have such an esteemed panel here with us today. So let's get to the sort of main section of the webinar, really, which is the panel discussion itself. So we've prepared a few questions that we are going to run past our panelists. We might not have quite enough time to ask everybody each question, but we'll probably take it in turns a little bit in terms of who we ask each of these questions. So that should mean we can finish in good time. But the first one we have here is, what reasons have you seen where firms choose to build, buy, or outsource their data platform? And Anya, could I start with you on this one, please?
Of course, certainly. So if we run through the three options here then. So we see that firms typically are building where they see that they've got strategic and intellectual property within their data platform. So if they're thinking about complex multi-assets, if they've got heavy private markets as well, then it means that they've got bespoke calculations, etc., that they need to support. To do this, though, it's really important that the firms have a good understanding of the engineering capability to support it. So if we benchmark this, we typically think that it's 1 to 2 years to develop a data platform internally, and that as the team size to support that can be anywhere from 20 to 45 FTEs. So it's quite a significant commitment from the clients to do it. But if it's something that really is part of their differentiation, then it's an investment for them. Versus buy, where speed is really the optimal consideration here. It significantly reduces the implementation timeline for clients. In our experience, it can be anything as much as halving it from a 2-year implementation internally to something that can be done with the right partner in 12 months. It is important, though, and I think we all know this, but it's really something to always consider, is that the buy does not come without your own internal support of that. So it doesn't mean no build, and cannot stress that enough for clients to think about it when they're looking at it, particularly thinking about how they'll support this over the medium and longer term. So we look at the 3 to 5 years for this. And then finally, for outsourced, I think it's really interesting where the opportunities for this really come up. We see that it's increased quite a lot, particularly post the pandemic. But there's some really strong suppliers in this area, and it's very useful for the commodity data sets that we have. But the challenge that we see from our clients is, how does this support with private markets in particular? So that's the kind of interesting question to be asking any outsourced suppliers that you're working with. Generally speaking, then, to wrap up, we see that clients, often it's a hybrid in actual fact. So it may be that they're using a different combination across the three in order to deliver this.
Yes, that really makes a lot of sense. And what you said there about buying can actually sometimes include elements of build, particularly if an investment manager wants to become self-sufficient with their data vendor platform that they've bought, and they want to actually configure it themselves. You know, you could sort of argue that that configuration work is kind of a bit of a build process. So there's a bit of overlap between the three approaches. It's not totally clear cut that you've got to just do buy, or you've just got to do build, or you've just got to do binary, but it sort of depends on what level of control you want to have over the end result, I think. So yeah, thank you for those insights.
One final thing on that is that often we talk about maturity as well. I think that's often been thought to be the consideration here. I think that what we see now with our clients is actually it's a lot more open across which clients are open to any of the three options.
Yes, completely agree on that. And what about you, Jason, on this question?
Yeah, no, I agree with Anya completely. I think it is around the business outcome, the business problem needing to be resolved first and foremost, and the complexity of your environment, you know, multifunctional, multi-platform, and or usually multi-generational as well. I think to augment, though, certainly in my learned experience of what I've seen more recently is the availability of a natural solution sometimes influences. So, for example, if your custodian or administrator is a Bank of New York or State Street that has a data vault or an alpha solution, therefore it naturally fits or augments your operating model. Your investment platform, if you're on Aladdin and you look at the Aladdin data cloud, you know, that availability or proximity of the data environment to one of your core processes, and more so now, though, those players are moving to that space, I think can influence you in terms of cost, agility, certainty. I think also the flexibility that you need as an organization, perhaps to do your own curation, as Anya said, in a more specified area. But again, a lot of those providers now are proposing to offer the ability to not just maintain the data they manage for you, but to put your own data into those environments, to curate, to manage, to augment the data model with it. So I think those two areas, the availability of a natural solution and what you actually want to do in the data environment and who you're with, can also influence your decision making, or certainly your options evaluation.
Absolutely, I can well imagine that you know, proximity argument is a sort of easy one, but the thing to always be careful of in that scenario, I feel, is what sort of control do you still have over the outsourced model? Can you bring your own data to the party, or is it very much a this one size fits all type approach?
Yeah.
So that's something that
Well,
really needs to
that's
be
what I said. Sorry, James. The propose at the moment that you can curate in these big environments. I've seen some of it, but I haven't seen it really enabled in the way it's being sold just yet. But I know that's to be proven.
Yes, it's still a little bit immature, actually, the offerings of some of those players, and growing. And maybe Duncan, I'll hand over to you to give your thoughts on this one, please.
So I wouldn't disagree with anything anybody said. First and foremost, I think they're all really good reasons about looking at things. If you look at build, buy, or outsource, all of them will work. It just depends on the person that's trying to do it. So you can make build work in a small firm or a big firm. You can make buy work in a small firm or a big firm. It's about the understanding of the impact to your firm and your organization that each of those choices will have. When you look at asset managers, they're typically gluing together commercial systems. So data management for them is glue. It's sticking stuff together. It's like putting Lego bricks all together. If you're just sticking things together, you're probably not mature enough to go down the build path yourselves. So you're immediately looking at buy or an outsource. If you have capabilities in-house to do that, great, that works. I think you should go down that path. But when you really look at it, data for an organization is your intellectual property. That's what an asset manager is consuming. That's what they're manufacturing. That's what they're delivering out. It's the lifeblood of their organization. It's the most important thing that they're really doing. So when you make decisions about data platforms and data structures in an organization, these very much need to be considering the questions, not just about how do you do it and how do you stick things together, but ultimately, what do we want to do as a firm? Where do we want to go, and how do we want to differentiate ourselves? And if that is very focused around unique or non-standard propositions, you ultimately have to go down the build or buy configure, as you put it, James, and that's very good, strong overlap. You have to go down that path, because as soon as you go to outsourcing or pushing it to someone else, your priorities are now managed by someone else, some other organization. Your unique juice or glue that makes you special is now dependent on someone else's priorities. So for me, those are the sort of challenges that you need to look at. Who is ultimately in control of your destiny?
Yes, I completely agree. About the differentiators, and what we often sort of say, the secret sauce of an asset manager will really determine which of the three is correct for them. And like you say, there isn't a right or wrong answer. And I also agree with your point about, if you've got the right sort of stakeholders and leadership team, and they can drive it forward, then all three of them can be a big success, really. So yeah, some very interesting insights there. Thank you all. So moving on to the next question. So this one is really about some of the costs behind each decision. So what hidden unforeseen costs can creep in with the build, buy, or outsource approaches? Jason, can I go to you with this one first, please?
Of course, yeah. It's a bit of a broad answer, really, because I think it feeds off Duncan's last point. Data and data environments don't just exist. They mirror the strengths, the fragilities, the complexity of your whole operating environment. Everybody in the organization touches data, whether it be a client contact detail, an investment instrument, a trade, or whatever. So when you sort of look at the costs of implementation, the costs of ownership, the costs of maintenance, in any of these approaches, they all relate to a number of factors, I think. Primarily at the heart of it is understanding that integration and that retirement strategy. What are you putting in? What are you taking out? And how? Having a really good understanding of the data model around it. So first and foremost, you need to have that. But the overruns, generally those costs I've experienced have come from having complex, fragmented legacy data and environments that really need to be understood. You can't just put something new in and say, now use that. You've got to really understand what was there before, what was built. Prior to really inform that change, to understand the data at levels that are probably unfamiliar, and your SMEs have become more used to being operators rather than really understand what's going on in the data, so specifications and clarity around that. That operating model complexity, generally putting in a data environment involves quite a lot of business process and potentially organizational change around upstream and downstream, in areas where you may not be focused. So the broad impact of really leveraging and getting the value is wide. And then you have obviously data access, licensing needs, all of those elements underneath it. So to me, it's an architectural question, and understanding before you enter into this in terms of costs, impacts, and costs of ownership ongoing. What are you changing, and how is that going to change across the organization? And think much wider than data, think much around process, outcomes, organization, that integration process, that retirement process. And so many programs, so many data projects are data projects. And in their own right, they don't exist. And that's where those costs and those challenges come.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's very rare that you get somebody going out to just find a new data platform. It's so often part of a larger transformation. And in those cases, like you say, you need to be aware of what's there today, what customizations are in place today, because what if the new model doesn't support those same customizations? You could be in a world of trouble at that point. And that's when, like you say, the cost increases could creep in then.
And I think the organisational, to that point, the organisational impacts are vast, and I think they probably come far too late in really getting buy-in and understanding from everybody across the organisation around what this really means and what needs to change. They're the things that take time, take more analysis, and cause not just roadblocks, but sometimes divert the project.
Yes. Duncan, what's your take on this question?
Oh, so I always refer to Conway's Law here, because Conway's Law is a very old kind of internet kind of concept, which essentially states that an organization's technical architecture and infrastructure will come to represent their organizational infrastructure. So, for example, if you have a very complex, hierarchical and siloed organizational structure, you're pretty certain you're going to have a complex, siloed technical infrastructure. And that is always going to be a challenge, working cross silos, getting people to work and collaborate together. The bigger the organization, the more complex, challenging this will be. So that's one part of it. The second part, and it's kind of riffing on what Jason was talking about. When you look at organizations, the concept of the operating model and how they work is not built natively. It's not built raw. It's an evolution over a period of time. And the longer that organization has been operating, the more complex and scar tissue has built up over that operating model. Things have gone wrong at a point in time. So someone's put a Four Eyes check in, or this went wrong. So we went and put it into another system, and we complex fragmentation of data flows over to something else. And then when you go and put your new data platform in, you're suddenly dealing with trying to deal with edge cases and things that actually you shouldn't really put in a data platform. You should be sitting there going, let's fix the operating model. It'll be quicker and cheaper. And as an organization, we could focus on working leaner as opposed to trying to replicate our old past operational mistakes into new technology. Now, that's easy to say. It's a little bit harder to do, obviously. That's why all of us are in business and why we do what we do. But it's the most productive way of doing things. So thinking in terms of operating model, target operating model, where you want to go, target information model, the data taxonomy, structures, governance, lineage controls, and things that you need from a data perspective. And then the target architectural model. What is the technology that we need to solve these problems and processes? So your Tom becomes a Tim, becomes a Tam, and you've got three viewpoints from a business, data, and technology perspective of the same thing. I found that solves the problems you will always get in terms of people confused, hard to make decisions, very complex operating models that cause the increased costs as you go over time.
Yeah, excellent points. And yeah, the workflow re-engineering side of things and not just rebuilding what was there before is a really important point. And I think consultancies can really help a lot with that side of things. So that's probably a good segue to bring you in on this question, Anya, in terms of the costs. So yeah, what have you seen in your experience?
I think it's very interesting what Duncan was just describing there, because what we see is that sometimes when firms look to build, what they're really unintentionally doing is that they're addressing their current issues. So they're building to solve the problems that they've got at the moment, but actually because they haven't taken that strategic view that Duncan's quite well laid out there, it means that they're actually therefore creating their tech debt there. So it's really important, if they are going to build, to look at what that strategic view is. So over the medium and longer term horizons, what it looks like for their teams, the direction that they're moving in. And then the costs for this, obviously, we've talked about the size of the teams that are needed to run it, but it's also understanding that over that timeline, as they move into other asset classes, what does it mean for them to have that ongoing, persistent headcount that they need to support internally? There's also, obviously, if you're looking internally, there's the opportunity cost as well. You are diverting your teams to be focusing on building your data platform and if that's important to you and you believe that that's really where some of your differentiators lie, then absolutely. But it does mean that those engineering teams are not looking at other areas where you could be really innovating. So that's certainly one of the costs that we talk about to our clients when they're looking at their build solution. Across buy, I think we've touched on it before as well. There's the cost there can also be about your agility as well, though. So does your partner that you're outsourcing to, or the platform that you're buying, do they have the same strategic path that you do, or are you going to have some unexpected costs associated with it? You're not going to be able to move into new markets as you expect to, and also where the boundaries lie with them. So there's interesting additional ones when you're looking at the other providers.
Yes, it's definitely a very nuanced sort of question, really, and it's not easy to calculate, particularly when it comes to those opportunity costs. But I completely agree. I mean, from Fencore's perspective, we feel that engineers at most investment managers would be better spent on other things other than building pipelines and ETL things. And particularly now with AI, those engineers could be repurposed in much more interesting and valuable areas of the business. Yeah, I mean, we're obviously advocating the buy perspective, so it's we're a little bit biased in that perspective. Let's move on to the next question. Oh, so just a reminder that we do have some polls. So on the left-hand panel, you should see some polls as well as a Q&A box. If you wanted to pop in any questions, we'll hopefully have time to answer a couple of those at the end. So moving on to the next question. As investment firms expand into new asset classes, geographic markets, and data sources, how scalable are each of these three build versus buy versus outsource approaches? Duncan, can I go for you first, please?
I love this one. So look, there was a very interesting stat that was wrongly attributed to IBM that said it was something like 80% of the data created by humanity has been created in the last 3 years. Now, there's no actual evidence or proof of this. It's just a great quote. But when you look at that, if that holds true, any technology system that's older than 3 or 4 years old, it's probably not set or capable of dealing with massive scales of data. So what you're essentially saying there is you need to be, if you're looking at a build or a buy approach, you need to be looking at some of the more modern technologies, which is almost an anathema to our risk-averse industry, where we tend to look at more staid players or more traditional software approaches because they're safer. But because data is expanding exponentially and the amount of information that you're dealing with, you actually want to shift your perspective and look at the newer approaches. So if you're looking at a buy approach or if you're looking at a build approach, then I would 100% be saying either of those work, but look at the modern technology stacks and the newer approaches, things like unstructured data, semantic modeling and semantic layers, all really important capabilities that you need to look at. The data warehouse world is probably not where you want to go. The other side, and I think it's worth looking at, when you're outsourcing, that's both a positive and a negative. If you look at an outsource approach, it's positive because it's not just your problem now. If you're looking at new asset classes like private assets, if you're looking at new geographic markets, you're now not building this stuff yourself. It's a shared commodity across a group of people, and the outsourcer is likely to drive that quicker. The downside to that is if you have a very specific or niche area, it's unlikely to be dealt with in that platform. And the last part of that outsource challenge is, whilst it's lovely to get rid of your mess for less and push it to someone else, what you're actually doing is you're locking into their technology stack. Can you be sure that your outsource provider has the capabilities to deal with exponentially increasing data, complex calculations, weird and concerning geographic regions? And are they supporting you from a regulatory perspective there as well, in terms of data privacy, GDPR, and data residency, all of which are stuff that you are responsible for, but you've outsourced to someone else. So for me, that kind of starts to tilt things a little bit further back to the build and buy space than outsourcing, because you want to be in control of your own destiny. That doesn't mean that it doesn't work to outsource, but if you're looking at this space, you'll probably want to consider a little bit more personal control.
Yes, and I think the emphasis on modern technology is a really important one. And like you say, but even with the outsource providers, you might be actually putting it onto something that's 30-year-old technology or a hodgepodge of glued together old systems that, then you have the flashy marketing presenting it as one nice system, but actually it's a hodgepodge of multiple. So those are sort of things to be aware of with the outsource model for sure. What about you, Anya?
So I think it's I think that's a very valid point about the outsourcing. If we think about buy then, so it's really works very well for the common sort of vanilla areas, say listed assets, benchmarks, etc. Like the speed, the agility to move into these is, it's really important for the clients, and it's a real differentiator for looking to buy here. It's obviously the catch though lies in the outliers, in the niche areas. And one of the things that we would tend to think about is that, I suppose it's similar for your outsourcing, is that where you're buying, you are still dependent on the vendor there and what they consider the areas they're moving into. And what they're trying to solve for is their median client. Now, if you fall within that category, then absolutely it's going to be a very smooth ride for you as you move into other areas. But if you are one of those outliers, then you need to work with the vendor to understand how they can support you. So it's about that partnership and understanding how that will develop over time. Internally, so if you're looking to build, the flexibility to move where you want to move is obviously very compelling. But the team size, again, I think I keep coming back to this, our experience is really where clients have a good understanding of this, then absolutely it's a very strong path to follow. But each change that you move, each area you move into, new asset class, that can become a mini project just in and of itself. So your agility and your, the ease to move into it means you can be looking at 3 to 6 months just to move somewhere that you've got a clear plan around. So I think those are two considerations on both the buy and the build, is really how do you plan out the move into these new areas?
Yes, I think that actually all three areas could have issues around scalability depending on how it was implemented. With the build, you probably need to raise a ticket with your internal IT team to get them to look at something, and that could take a long while. With build, like you say, with the certain vendors might not be very agile, or there's no way to configure it yourself to do what you need it to do. And with the outsourced, then you might also need to put in a request, and whether that can then be done quickly or at all is the other question. So all three models could potentially have scalability and timeliness issues depending on how exactly it looks. So I'm going to move on to our final question. So this one is, most investment firms already have multiple legacy systems and third-party data feeds. How do the integration challenges and architectural considerations differ between building, buying, or outsourcing a data platform? Jason, can I get your thoughts on this one first, please?
Yeah, just to sort of lead to this, but also feed on the last, I think part of the whole debate is around who you are as an organization. If you're multinational, multi-asset class, then your data need is probably quite different from a specialist regional private equity or whatever. So the operating model that you're trying to solve for, and what you want to do where, are you trying to solve your operational data, or are you trying to solve your insights, determines where you go in terms of buy, build, outsource. So what's even available to you, frankly, in the marketplace in terms of maturity. But I think if you then sort of take any of those models and look at the legacy systems, the third-party data feeds, the integration challenges, I think across all three, for the reasons we already discussed, systems, processes, perhaps organizational change, it's really around where the burden is, the heavy lifting lies, is perhaps potentially a differentiating factor. If it's your core operational data, then you're probably down the buy outsource space. If it's and you want certainty around that environment, a proven platform. But I think you always need to manage the risks, the delivery of benefits, and all of those themselves. If you're more specialized and you're really focused on insight, then the integration challenges are possibly less, because you are really more focused in a specific area, and you're managing things that are in your IP yourself. So I think I still come back to it. It's what is the problem you're trying to solve, and where in your operating model. Is it your core operational data, or is it your more interesting insights and your IP data, because the solutions and the integration challenges are very, very different. At the former end, they're big and heavy. And I think proven, certainly total portfolio is something that third parties are solving much better than fund managers are, because they are already having to solve multi-asset class integration. If it's more specifically in a more emerging area, then I think it's something you do yourself. But the integrations are probably a lot less there, because it is more of a siloed area that with real focus and real specialization on it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jason. And how about you, Duncan, on this one?
I love this. So this ties directly into the target information model. It's essentially, I touched on it earlier, every organization is a data factory. It's bringing data in, it's manufacturing data, and it's sending data out. So it's you're in and you're out, and you shake it all about in the middle. It's the hokey cokey of data. So what you're essentially saying is, do you know what you're bringing in? Do you know where it's coming from? Do you know what data you're manufacturing internally and then using for further processes? Do you have a data catalog? Do you understand your critical data elements through the process? Are you ensure that you're tracking the lineage and quality of that information through? That then allows you to understand the taxonomy or language that each of these systems or data feeds are coming to you in, and to make a judgment call on how you transform and translate from language to language. When it comes down to it, data is just Google Translate. You've got systems feeding information that is in French, German, Italian, Spanish, and you're trying to convert it into a lingua franca in the middle. You're trying to convert it into Latin so that you can use it within your organization and then deliver it out to people in the language they want to consume. So converting back to French, Spanish, Italian, German. That all drives how you glue this stuff together. None of this is actually a technology problem. It's a data problem. Do you understand all that information? Do you understand those languages? And can you then move it out of the organization? So for me, that's where people typically get this wrong. They're looking at it as a technical problem, but it's actually a data problem, and it's a data challenge to understand. And then probably the last thing to look at is you are now dealing with mainframe data feeds. You may not have mainframes in your organization, but your third-party data feeds from your asset services, from your commercial data vendors, they're almost certainly coming from mainframes. Can you track the lineage and quality of that mainframe data? Where is your barrier into your organization from which you take that data and take ownership, and you're assessing the quality and value of it as it goes through? So lots and lots of kind of complexity there. If you're building or you're buying, and I kind of think that there's a very strong overlap between a build platform on something like Databricks or a buy platform on something like you guys, where they're very closely correlated and they're almost the same thing. You know, you're dealing with technology platforms that are very, very close to each other. You still have a lot of configuration and control, even on a buy platform, to be able to integrate these data sources. So they tend to be very similar in the challenge set here. The outsourcing space, this suddenly becomes really painful, because as soon as you outsource and you're dealing with third-party data feeds, does your outsource provider connect to those languages? If your outsource provider is only speaking European languages, and all of a sudden you now need to connect to the Far East, and you're dealing with Japanese character sets, and your outsource provider doesn't do that, you've suddenly got a problem, and you've got a challenge to deal with there, because that conversion won't work. So for me, that's kind of how I tend to look at it. Understand what you've got, understand what you're bringing in, understand what you're sending out, and understand what the complexities and transformations are between each of those steps. That will then allow you to be a lot smarter in selecting the build, the buy, or the outsource.
Great, thank you, Duncan. I really like that metaphor with the lingua franca. That's a very good way. I might steal that one.
Please,
it's a really good one.
125 people on the call can steal it.
So yeah, I think we've run out of time, unfortunately, for the question side of things. So the last part of the webinar. Oh, sorry, before I do that, one last thing here. The slide just reminded me is just the opportunity for everybody to give their final sort of hint, if there's one takeaway that you'd like to give to the audience, that would be really appreciated. Anya, can I start with you for that, please?
Yes, of course, sure. So what we would say is that clients should think about 3 questions on when they're looking at this, is to think about what is the commodity versus the true differentiator for them. So where do they really see their value, therefore lead to their decision here? How quickly do they need to show value to the business? And so thinking about that time horizon that I keep referring back to, when did the business expect to see value from this? And then finally, what's the true costs? So, mentioned it's team sizes, but it's also what the engineering costs, the opportunity costs, etc., associated with it. So across those 3 lenses, we think that that means that clients will make a decision that they're comfortable with and suits them.
Great stuff. Thank you, Anya. And how about you, Jason?
Yeah, I agree with Anya totally. I think the only bit I'd put on top of it is what I call the North Star. Too many data projects lose sight of business outcomes, and whilst implemented, they don't fully deliver the benefits. So for me, having a North Star, which is what is the business outcomes, what are those real outcomes we need to achieve for the organization, for the customers, why we're doing this, is really, really important. If you keep that true, then the whole organization will get behind it. It won't just be that technology project that's just been mentioned earlier or whatever. So that North Star is really, really important in a data program. Don't make it about the data, the technology, make it about a business outcome.
Fantastic. And Duncan, over to you.
Yeah, I'm going to paraphrase what Anya said, because it is spot on, but I'm going to paraphrase it in a very Duncan way, which is to take you back to the 1980s pop charts and a band called Funboy 3 and Bananarama, and essentially leave you with the title that it ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it that is important. That for me is the
That's
key.
what makes results, Duncan.
Exactly.
I remember the lyrics, and they're the business outcomes that I spoke to.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah.
That was really insightful. I really appreciate all those fantastic thoughts. The final part of the webinar is an opportunity just for us to Fencore to kind of share a few more of our opinions on the whole matter and share a few of those thoughts and how we see the world. I want to start off by talking about the challenge with the legacy EDMs. And when I started Fencore around 7 years ago, and I spoke to colleagues and friends about the decision to do that, some of them said, but the EDM space is already really crowded. There's so many players out there already with deep pockets and so on. Are you sure you want to go and do this? And I had seen what I felt like was a real gap in the market for something more modern and easier to configure, shorter implementations and so on. And so I went off and did it. But just a couple of months ago, I saw these couple of paragraphs here in a team group white paper, which really resonated and so succinctly spelled out the exact reason why I started Fencore. And I'm going to just read it out quickly. The Enterprise Data Management Platforms Paradox. EDM platforms attempt to combine internal control with vendor-supported capabilities. These platforms promise architectural solutions to operational problems. In practice, implementation challenges often undermine these benefits. Extended deployment timelines mean business requirements may evolve. Organizations frequently discover that while platforms provide better tools, they still require substantial teams to operate them efficiently, limiting efficiency gains and increasing dependency risk. The white paper then went on and actually talked about the sponsor of the white paper, and that was an outsourced provider model, and never actually talked about the elephant in the room, in my opinion, which is, why doesn't somebody solve the damn challenge with the legacy EDMs? And so, but it really just, I couldn't stop reading and just thought, wow, this so summarizes why we started Fencore. And really, that's our take on the buy side of things. Out of the 3 we've talked about, is the buy one has traditionally suffered from these serious challenges, and that was our goal. Was exactly this: is to solve this problem and bring something more no code, easy to configure, less technical to the industry. So how do we solve that? So as I say, no code drag and drop style configuration. So although you still retain control over your pipelines and you can still do any kind of level of complexity you want, you don't need to use coding to do it. And that speeds up the amount of effort it takes to do. So even if you have esoteric requirements and weird and wonderful stuff, weird asset classes, you can do it, but it's just not done with Python, which is hard to explain to the new developers. It's done with no code style configuration. So as I say, shorter list of expertise required on your CV, so you're not as expensive. And the other thing that I found with legacy EDMs was they're quite good sometimes at building out the first version of the pipelines, but then it's the cost of changing those once you've built them. It's too big a project every time you want to change something in the future, bring on a new source, add some new fields to the master. All that just always ended up being too cumbersome, too expensive, and the saving you were going to do from implementing the change would not be enough to do the change. So then you'd end up stuck with rigid pipelines in the not sort of future-proof pipelines. So the other thing is there's lots of kind of industry agnostic platforms out there as well, and I think that's also something that should come with a word of warning, because you do want to be speaking the same language as your data management platform provider. And this probably is quite along the lines of what you've been saying, Annie, about the large teams of software engineers. Sorry, just trying to advance. There we go. Yeah, software engineers, software testers, DevOps folks, BAs, cloud engineers, data engineers, subject matter experts, and so on. So on the in-house build side, you just need a gigantic team. And that comes with the associated large cost, risk, and long timelines. And in the Fencore world, because it's so easy to configure, you don't need to write a single create table statement ever. There's never a single alter table statement. That's all just done all by the system. All the indexes created for you, so you don't need any DBAs. No software engineers, and so on. Or what I should say is your software engineers can be doing far more interesting stuff. That's the key point. So low cost, low risk, and quicker go live. So we've talked about the challenges with the EDM platforms and the challenges with the in-house builds, and that often led to investment managers going into this kind of infinite loop where somebody who advocates buying wins the day. They buy, it goes badly, they get disillusioned. The people the stakeholders who are advocating a build next time have the more powerful hand, so they do it. It goes badly, it goes wrong. They spend too much, and so then they end up in this kind of infinite loop, swapping every 5 years. And potentially you could bring in outsource into that loop as well, outsourcing things, deciding it was the wrong thing to do, and building it back, bringing it back in again. And so how do you break out of that? And really, in our opinion, obviously, it's the solving the EDM platform issue that's been blocking progress over the past 20 years. So the final one is the outsourcing side of things, and we've already said this on the panel discussion, which is that how important it is to keep your secret sauce, your differentiator as an investment manager. It's really important to analyze that and decide what it is, and make sure that you keep that in-house and don't lose control of that. But generally speaking, we still believe that you should stay in control of all your data, even the bits that you outsource. You should still be able to have a say in the shape of it, the flows. If you just go with a model or a provider who is a one-size-fits-all, no input from any clients, we don't really see that as a positive for an investment manager, or most investment managers. And so that leads into, what would you do if you one day wanted to bring it back in-house? And if you've gone with one of those, it's going to be really hard. And we have some providers who provide a managed service on Fencore itself, and we can offer managed services and outsourcing parts of your operations. And if you ever wanted to actually operate the Fencore platform yourself in-house again, it would be a 1-week job to bring it back in-house. And so those kind of things are quite important to consider in the whole thing as well, I think. So yeah, we offer a free trial. So if anybody is intrigued enough to give it a try, do let me know. But without further ado, I just want to see if there are any questions that have popped in. I did see a few popping up. So let me just see. So one question here that's actually for the panelists. So just see if anybody would be keen to answer this one. As of today, is there any organization that you've seen that currently has a near perfect model in the eyes of the panelists? Have you experienced anyone that has what you describe as a near perfect model? Anybody want to offer an opinion on that one?
Well, from my perspective, the answer is no, and anybody who tells you otherwise is probably lying, because I don't think there's ever a thing as perfection in data, and it is a constantly evolving battle that you're fighting to keep progressing. As soon as you think you've hit a data platform and you're where you need to be, something new pops up and you need to run a new capability, or you need to adapt and adjust. The world keeps continuously evolving. Data platforms need to keep continuously evolving.
I think, James, as well, it ties back to the slide that you just showed a minute ago with the arrows. I think that I've seen clients who are responding well to where they currently are on that journey. So they understand that currently their appetite is to buy based on their previous experience and what they see as their 5-year roadmap. So that's great for them there. That doesn't mean that that's the one and done, and that's going to still be suitable. So I think that we see people who are making the right decisions given their current situation. But yeah, I don't think anyone can say that client's nailed it. Everyone should follow them.
Just augment that with,
it's very subjective as well.
Sorry, James. Apologies talking over you. I just augment it with, there are lots of rich data platforms out there, and a lot of people investing a lot of money in them. But I think it still comes down to the point you were saying, these have to exist in your ecosystem, and nothing's going to be perfect for your ecosystem because your ecosystem's been evolved and developed in its own way, shape, or form. And it's that translation, it's that language that Duncan spoke about earlier. It's integrating it, and the costs and the benefits of that. But there are a lot of very, very rich data models out there and data platforms, yours included. But none of them could ever be perfect for your specific need unless you were completely vanilla and had engineered into it, maybe, which we're not, because we always have some IP that makes all of our organizations good at what they do. So I think there's lots to be learned, and there's some really good data models. Some of them aren't exposed. You know, BlackRock always talk about theirs. It's going to be rich, it's going to be global, but can you get it? No, and I can understand why not.
Yes, I totally agree that yeah, there's some compromises that have to be done with each approach. You know, I mean, if you had an unlimited internal development team, you could build exactly what you need, but nobody has that. So even with the build approach, where people say you've got total control, there's still limits to your budget. There's still limits to what the internal teams can ask for. So then you'd have to compromise. And likewise with the buy, there might be some parts of your operating model with different EDM vendors that you'd need to compromise a little bit based on what they can do and so on. So
situationally, though, sorry, James, just building on that, situationally though, and there was the point around agility earlier. If you know where your business wants to go and the markets you want to go into, there could be a close to reasonable model for you if it's already mature in those spaces, and you get actually more agility by buying or outsourcing to a platform that is already mature in the areas that you are foreseeing your strategy going. So I think there could be something that's close to, not perfect, but close to really good for what you need in your organization.
Yes, I think that's a fair point. Just want to touch on a couple of polls. So we did ask, have you ever experienced a poor build, buy, or outsource decision? And we did have a 90% yes vote. So that's definitely, I guess that's why we did have an interest in this webinar. It's resonated, and a lot of people have experienced that very same problem. And we did also ask what topic you'd like to see next for a future webinar: future-proof data operating model, no code and what it means, medallion architecture, pros and cons, deep dive on different Fencore features. And the winner is the future-proof data operating model. So no votes for the medallion architecture. I'm a little bit surprised about that. I thought that might pique some people's interest, but I'm actually quite glad that nobody wants to hear about that one. So great. So yeah, I think we'll wrap up at this point. So I want to really give a big thank you to our guest speakers. I really appreciate you taking your time to join the webinar today. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you to to all the attendees dialing in as well. And thank you, Thomas, for doing the intro part as well. So yeah, let's wrap up at this point. So thanks, everyone.